Just a quick heads up, this might be a little long video, so just bear in mind. This is a very complex topic. I'll try to break it down smoothly, and it's really interesting to listen about the history and how it's affecting modern society. So try not to drop off, listen to the whole thing. The free and open source software does not mean price. You can sell the software for any price you'd like. I'm talking about liberation or freedom that lets us control the software the way we want to. Let's say you're hungry right now, like real hungry. What do? Obviously, you get something to eat. So you go out, exchange cash, or buy some food. Or ask someone to cook for you back at home. So you buy the ingredients, follow a recipe, cook and enjoy your meal. Your food is physically right in front of you. You can relish, you can smell, you can touch it, you can see it. If I steal your plate of food, I have it and you don't. It can only be at one place at one time. You cannot make exact duplicate copies of it like you can digitally with software. Well, what is software exactly? Let's say when I have some plain paper in front of me and I have a switch which controls the tube light or some kind of light. And now when I turn the switch on, I'll write a 1, wait for a second and write again 1 if the switch is on, or if the light is off, I'll write 0. In this case, I'll manually turn on and off the light. So you get a pattern and you can document it on paper. This pattern is a piece of instruction that I or you can understand. I can then send this to someone across the globe, and when they follow this simple piece of instruction, you'll probably get a similar pattern. These instructions are called programs in its most basic form, often found in thousands of lines of ones and zeros, and is a pain to decode what it really means without proper documentation. Look at the pixels on your screen, squint, use a magnifying glass, whatever. There are like thousands of pixels on your screen, miniature light bulbs you could think of, turning on and off for each alphabet, line, animation, millions of times each day to show meaningful information to you. Imagine trying to manually decode if I gave you paper and a formula to convert those ones and zeros into text or words or colors on a screen. It'll take ages to decode. Yet that's exactly what's happening right now. As you stream this video, your computer is doing all of that for you, arranging everything for you and crunching those numbers to help you consume your favorite memes, TV shows, work on documents, or play games.
He who gives the code to the computer has power over what's running on the computer
and effectively controls the computer. Thus, a programmer is a very powerful person. Think of it. A computer is just a universal machine. Its only job is to accurately crunch those numbers, process those programs, and give the desired output. It might even harm the user. A computer does not have a mind of its own. It'll just do things as it's given. If there's a bomb and there's a code to detonate it, the computer will simply plainly follow it and it'll explode, because that's how it works. Microsoft Windows spying on its users, Apple removing apps from the App Store, Facebook collecting too much information against you, the list goes on. What do these companies have that you don't? So what is that thing, that secret sauce? It's called source code. It's the secret sauce or the recipe needed to make software. I'll go back to the cooking example. If I gave you a new kind of dish and did not tell you how to make it, it would be very hard to replicate it, or you'd rather not eat it in fear of allergies or dietary issues. In the same way, remember those ones and zeros? That's called a binary form, something that computers understand. Source code is what humans write in English words that we can understand. You can actually just go to websites right now, go to my website on a desktop browser, right click and hit view source. You see the source code in HTML and CSS, and you can kind of understand it. Let's say there are like colors, opening tags, closing tags, paragraph lines, bold text, links. If you could like read through it, it's in plain English and not those ones and zeros. Obviously, if we had access to the source code, we can remove some parts or you can change it to do things as we wish. So we don't want things like spyware, data collection, telemetry and stuff, or it's some kind of feature you want to add to a program, you can change it if you had access to source code. So let's go back to that cooking example. Sure, you might not cook, so you'd hire someone else, or you'd ask your mom, your grandparents, parents, whatever, someone else to cook for you. That is, if you have the recipe. Add some extra spice, remove this ingredient, experiment with new flavors, make a whole new recipe inspired by the old one, and then sell it again. In a similar way, you don't need to program, but you need access to source code to control the program. You can give the source code to someone else and then they do it for you if you don't know how to program, right? Otherwise, you'll settle for whatever the real owner gave you. Let's say it's Microsoft, they gave you Windows 10, and you let them control what runs on your computer. In a way, you just rent the software from them and you don't have any control. You wouldn't want to do that, right? It's not natural. Treating digital things as physical property is weird. One day they might say we're not going to support you any longer, like they did with Windows XP 7, 8, and now Windows 10 moving on to 11. Probably they'll ditch Windows 11 too. You're basically renting and not owning your software. Imagine you bought a book, you read it, you can throw it away, sell it, do whatever you want with it. The author is still the same person, Microsoft, let's say. You did not have any problem with it because it's physical and you can like actually own it. You have the freedom to do whatever you want with it. But with software, it's sadly not the case. It's not physical property. There's the weird source code thing and the binary thing where you cannot decode the source code from the binary, right? It's very, very hard. As I said, decoding ones and zeros in binary from thousands of them without any kind of documentation is a pain. Even with documentation, it's going to take a lot of time to decode it.
Okay, then why don't we just simply ask for source code? Well, it's not that easy. These companies actually have recognized it, so they made a legal document asking you to sign it. Remember that terms and conditions page? There's also a page called EULA. It's an agreement that prevents you from asking for source code or any kind of freedom. This kind of software is called proprietary software, which takes away the freedom and subjugates the user. We are left helpless. So what do we do now? So what's the alternative? People have come together and fixed that problem by making software which respects users' freedom. It's the alternative to proprietary software. It's called free or freed Libre software.
This was actually a clever hack on the modern copyright system, where instead of taking away the user's freedom like proprietary software does, it guarantees it. Let's talk a bit about its history. It's called the Free or Libre software movement. Started in the 1980s by Richard Stallman, the founder of the GNU operating system. GNU. Yeah, it's a weird name. I'll get into that in a sec. Dr. Stallman was a researcher at MIT in the US, working in an AI lab. He had access to something called Unix. It was a popular proprietary operating system running on servers. It was proprietary, so he actually foresaw those problems and the injustice. He gave up his job at MIT and started working on a Libre clone of Unix that he called GNU. It's actually a recursive acronym, another clever hack, you could say. A hack does not mean hacking, it means playfully clever. So GNU, G-N-U, GNU's not Unix. See how it's nested inside the name? So anyway, Stallman started the Free Software Foundation to fund the GNU project, I guess, and he brought free and Libre software to the masses. He sold copies of his operating system for some money, and to fund development, he could hire more people, and he was more focused on the philosophy and to bring a social change.
Free software means software that respects the user's freedom. There are 4 essential freedoms that the user of software should always have. Freedom 0 is the freedom to run the program however you wish. Freedom 1 is the freedom to study the source code of the program and change it to make the program do what you wish. Freedom 2 is the freedom to distribute copies of the program to others when you wish. Now this includes republication of the program. And freedom 3 is the freedom to distribute copies of your modified versions to others when you wish. And this also includes publication, if you that's how far you wish to go. If you have all 4 of these essential freedoms, then the program is free software, which means that the social system of the distribution of this program is an ethical system that respects the freedom and community of the users. If one of these freedoms is missing, then the program is proprietary software, meaning that it keeps the users divided and helpless and gives the developer power over the users. This is an injustice. Proprietary software should not exist and should not be used. If you want to have freedom, the only way you can have it while using computers is by rejecting proprietary software. And that's the aim of the free software movement. We want to replace proprietary software with its unjust social system with free software and its ethical social system. And so we develop free replacements for proprietary software and other free programs whenever we get an idea, so that the world can live in freedom. The part that uses computers, at least in that one area of life. Because winning and maintaining freedom in general is a much bigger, much broader, and harder activity. But this is one part of it.
Then in 1992, there was a guy called Linus Torvalds from Finland, I believe. He made his own piece of software called a kernel, a thing which is responsible for bridging the hardware and the software together. So it's your keyboard and your software running, connecting everything and then making it work together. And it was used along with the GNU system, which was also free software. So the kernel Linux, that's what he called it, and the operating system GNU, both were free software. You could combine it. Remember modified copies, those essential freedoms, basically exercising them.
this was it. People started to make copies, adding features, mostly things that were needed according to their own needs, and then sold copies for money. Made whole companies out of it, like Red Hat, which funds Fedora, while Stallman was handling more of the legal and philosophical things, and the licenses part. Obviously, the Linux name was much cooler. It's much cooler. GNU is like weird to call or pronounce. Anyway, the word free didn't appeal to investors, and they thought free meant free of cost. In my opinion, Stallman and the GNU project community should have renamed free software to Libre software, or at the least freed software, as it implies a better meaning than the obvious free of cost meaning that we're used to nowadays. Anyway, that's too late to ponder upon or think about. The whole system was called GNU plus Linux and some other components like X11, GNOME, some other desktop environments, some other programs, utilities, whatever. So it eventually grew into a whole marketplace, other kinds of free software like WordPress, Drupal to manage websites, Android or mobile OS, which runs Linux, by the way, the kernel, but not the desktop tools found like in GNU. Google's Chromium or Firefox, which is mostly free software. Wikipedia, other kinds of tools that we take for granted. Windows users could get VLC these days. What do they use? VLC, Game Critic, Kdenlive, Inkscape, GNOME tools, KDE tools. Then there's Telegram, Signal, Matrix, the Fediverse, and VS Code, which is partly free software under the pushover license. A pushover license? What's that? It is a free software license which allows your software to be packaged and distributed in a proprietary way, but it was originally free software. For example, there's Chromium or VS Code. These are open source or free software programs, but later Microsoft had some proprietary features, branding, and packages it as proprietary software with a pushover license. That doesn't help anyone in the long run, right? So don't use pushover licenses. Essentially, it's the same as proprietary software. If your code is popular enough, someone's going to make a proprietary clone, and they don't have to legally release source code. On the other hand, there's copyleft licenses like the GNU GPL, Mozilla Public License. Basically, it forces developers to release source code and modifications if you distribute binaries in public, if asked by the end user. The original author and the community benefits as a whole, and when projects get really popular, I think there's a program called Audacity, which is a good example. It got sold out, the devs started to add telemetry, so the community forked it and then continued the project with a different name. Okay, this is a long talk, but it all began with one man's brave idea to make a free Libre operating system that does not harm or divide users and lets them do what they want. Again, I'm not saying commercialization is bad or these companies are bad. I want these companies to adopt Libre licensing and give source code to the users. For example, Google makes excellent products like Android or Chromium. It's just under a pushover Libre license. So fork projects like Brave on Google Chromium, Lineage OS, Graphene OS, remove all of those anti-features and exercise those freedoms and lets the user have control over their systems. Now there are some other kind of limitations, loopholes that people fall for. For example, I hear about Steam coming to GNU/Linux, or all of your Windows games are here now. Sure, you might get better performance because Windows sucks or something. Well, that misses the point. Steam is proprietary and still divides the users on a Libre environment, which is GNU/Linux. That's all. A little bit more freedom in this environment that Windows is no longer there to spy on you. But your games are still proprietary and prevent modifications or reselling. DRM. People still again use DRM like Spotify. Netflix give up their freedom in a free system. I'd advise not to use it. Watch my videos on that. But there's nothing stopping you from going back to DRM, using Steam, or heck, even use Windows and give in to that Stockholm syndrome. And then say I'm okay with being subjugated or something. That's how the Stockholm syndrome works. When you use a free system, you're completely doing it under your terms. No one's paying you to use GNU/Linux or forcing things on you, because you can exercise freedom number 0, the first freedom, to use it in any way you wish. And there's one more thing. There's no one place to find it all, like an ecosystem or a monopoly like Apple or Microsoft. There are multiple different choices or tools that you can use under GNU/Linux. It's a movement or an idea. It's not a forced marketplace that everyone's trapped under. There are popular choices though, like the ecosystems from Purism, Pine64, System 76, which makes hardware tailored to the GNU Linux user base. Anyway, you can't please everyone in the world, and games are a voluntary thing to do in society. Compare that to forcing the use of Zoom or the Microsoft Office suite. You're pressured by your work environment to use these tools. It's harder to say no, right? Most of the time you can use Libre apps like LibreOffice, OnlyOffice to open docx files. It works great. Zoom supports the phone number dial-in, or just meet up in a person, rather not run it or run it on someone else's machine in a browser, web browser, to help against browser fingerprinting. Another point is free software is also a legal measure. If your codes aren't functional, or if you live in North Korea or something, forget about exercising freedoms. Red Star OS, North Korea's GNU/Linux distro. In the state of North Korea, forget getting source code or changing the source code to remove tracking features or something. I don't think they even follow the US laws or international copyright laws in states such as these. So in most of the world, everyone just follows it and you should be able to exercise your rights everywhere. I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I understand, so just saying. The word open source, like I said, does not mean anything by itself. So don't just fall for the word open source. GitHub uses the word open source as a brand or marketing term. It can mean, for example, you can read the source code, but you can't modify or sell it, right? And the company can sue you if you sell it or package it again in a different name or something. It does not assure you of that freedom or guarantee freedom. It makes sense for verifying encryption in an app or something, meaning the publicly available source code, but you can't package it or sell it or use it according to your wish. So open source is just a diluted term. Try not to use that. Please don't use that. Okay, that's almost the end of this video. Go read the official GNU project announcement, 1984 or something. Oh, that's when it was announced. All links are in the description. My blog post, Stallman's TED Talk. After this, you can watch that on free software. Beware of some smear attacks on him and faulty press for things he did not say. Next, watch people like Luke Smith, DistroTube, Mental Outlaw, all these people, and actually understand what we GNU/Linux users use after leaving the proprietary software world behind. Okay, that's almost the end of this video. The next video is about how to install an operating system like GNU/Linux, so stay tuned. Especially with the new Windows 11 crowd hating how this new update is forced down their throats. This next video is for them. I'll link this video you're seeing right now as a prerequisite. I hope you enjoyed this video. As I've told you guys, I'm super busy. If you don't know, just read my blog post I wrote a few months ago. Link below. And I'm on PureTube, Odyssey. Follow my channel here for the latest. Thank GNU. Thank you for watching. Happy hacking.